Good morning. This is Pastor Brian. Thank you so much for joining me today as we read a chapter a day from the book of Romans. Today, chapter 13. I'll be reading from the Common English Bible. Feel free to follow along in your own favorite translation or just listen as we read chapter 13 together. Every person should place themselves under the authority of the government. There isn't any authority unless it comes from God, and the authorities that are there have been put in place by God. So anyone who would oppose the authority is standing against what God has established. People who take this kind of stand will get punished. The authorities don't frighten people who are doing the right thing. Rather, they frighten people who are doing wrong. Would you rather not be afraid of authority? Do what's right, and you will receive its approval. It is God's servant given for your benefit. But if you do what is wrong, be afraid because it doesn't have weapons to enforce the law for nothing. It is God's servant put in place to carry out his punishment on those who do what is wrong. That is why it is necessary to place yourself under the government's authority, not only to avoid God's punishment, but also for the sake of your conscience. You should also pay taxes for the same reason, because the authorities are God's assistants, concerned with this very thing. So pay everyone what you owe them. Pay the taxes you owe, pay the duties you are charged, give respect to those who you should give respect, and honor those you should honor. Don't be in debt to anyone except for the obligation to love each other. Whoever loves another person has fulfilled the law. The commandments: don't commit adultery, don't murder, don't steal, don't desire what others have, and any other commandments are all summed up in one word. You must love your neighbor as yourself. Love doesn't do anything wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is what fulfills the law. It's the end of chapter 13, just a really quick chapter as you just saw, primarily focusing on the need to follow government. And I think part of the reasoning behind that is that, one, Paul says very clearly, it's something that God has put in place. God has put in place government, and we can see that all the way back to King David when he was put in charge as their king, when all the people asked for a king to rule over the Israelites. And so God put government in place, and it's there for a reason. But the other thing I see is that it should be done out of love. And so again, Paul is reaching out to that idea of love, much like he did yesterday in chapter 12, and that everything about how those commandments, about how we should treat each other, that we shouldn't commit adultery, we shouldn't murder, we shouldn't steal, all those practical commandments that have to do with living one another, all boil down to what Jesus said. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God and love others is what Jesus says. Everything boils down to that. And if we love our neighbor, if we love ourselves, if we love God, then we will live in a way that just has everything that is done out of care for one another, out of love, out of living out the kind of life that God has called us to live. So all of these things that we have in our lives maybe are put there for a reason. And the thing that we should do with all of that is to interact with one another, this world, and everything out of an ethic of love. Because if we truly do what is loving for our neighbor, that is truly loving, that we truly believe God has said this is good and right and loving, then, as verse 10 says, love doesn't do anything wrong. Love doesn't do anything wrong. So what do you think about today's passage? What stuck out to you? Share it with a friend. Share it with us. Write it down so you remember. I hope that you are well. I hope that you stay safe. God bless you all, and I hope to see you tomorrow for chapter 14.